It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Today we have Martin Ward joining us from Mallorca. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Martin. We've been talking about this, I think, for a couple years now, and I cannot remember when we connected, but I remember probably back in 2012 or so, somewhere on Facebook, we started kind of talking back and forth. Do you remember how long it's been since we started connecting?
No, but it's some time, and time flies, so it probably is 2 or 3 years, or maybe even as long back as you say. So I'm not sure, but a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, but we are so happy to have a sliver of your time today.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Martin. Let's introduce our guest today.
Martin, we are so happy you are here because he is an informal and entertaining trainer and wine educator who passionately believes that the subjects of wine and food, either combined or separately, should be treated with respect, yet enjoyment. He has over several decades of experience working within the wine and wine training industry, experiencing all aspects of the food and wine culture, including training and entertaining both socially and professionally, working in different world cultures and environments, buying and marketing wine professionally, delivering comprehensive wine modules worldwide, researching and working in wine producing regions, presenting at major and regional shows on behalf of producers and generic bodies, and also working with multinational corporate organizations and wine producers.
So Martin has a full plate and a full glass. Is there anything we missed there?
Yeah, did we miss something?
Yeah, but I think I sound very busy.
Yes, you do. And that brings us to our first question. So we're just going to dive right in, Martin. First, I've got to know, why Mallorca? I mean, is the wine in Leicester no good? I mean, what's going on there?
Okay. Well, we're talking about two different worlds here because why Mallorca? Okay, first of all, nothing wrong with Leicester, my hometown back in England, a long time ago. Love it, still do. Working as a young lad several decades ago, as you thankfully pointed out, several decades. I'm not sure I like that. It was a long time ago, and the wine trade in Leicester then was very, very different. But having done a big stint in the UK in different roles and having travelled from a very, very early age around the wine world, I decided there had to be a better work-life balance. Working in this industry, food and wine, yes, it's nice to be busy, as my bio there clearly points out, but it shouldn't be stressful. And to be perfectly honest, working in the UK for a long time, it became stressful. It wasn't as much fun. And I wanted that life-work balance. So looking at various options around Spain, I settled on Mallorca some years ago now, back in about 2000 and early 2000s anyway, and just found that it had the perfect balance of slow way of life, climate, food, drink. What more can you want? Scenery, right. Beaches, mountains, all of those. That's why.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and we need to know what, like, the history of Mallorca and the winemaking there. I mean, how did that all come together? Were you into wine before you moved to Mallorca, or how did that come together?
Yeah, I've been in wine for many, many, many years. I don't really want to say how many because it's, as you pointed out before, several decades. So I worked in various roles in the UK and other places in wine for all of those, pretty much all of those decades. The history of Mallorca is interesting because people really do not know what we have on this island in many respects, not just wine. But in wine terms, we're not new. We've been making wine since 124 AD with the Romans.
Wow.
In fact. So we were for many, many, many centuries a very big wine producing region, almost a country, because you must remember that Mallorca was itself a kingdom for many, many centuries and encompassed more than just the island of Mallorca. And at one time we were exporting millions of liters of wine around the world.
So it's interesting also, and I know this isn't on the list of topics that we sent you, but when you mentioned you were in the wine industry for many decades, and I lived in England, I actually lived near Banbury, somewhere between there and Oxford.
Okay.
And I don't remember back in the early 90s, so we're talking about 28 years ago, I don't remember English wine even being that much on the radar. It was more about the beer and the cider and the mead and the things like that. So Mallorca actually has a longer wine history as far as winemaking, would you say?
Well, actually, no, it doesn't, because English winemaking, and I'm glad you said English, not British, it's a very different thing.
Right.
English winemaking and winemaking in Mallorca and much of Europe all goes back to Roman times.
Okay.
So again, England made great wine back in those days. Like there is a great similarity, because like Mallorca, England went through really difficult times for various political and commercial reasons. So the winemaking history is very much chopped about and very diverse. And like Mallorca now, it's making a real renaissance, a real comeback. So, for example, Mallorquin wine suddenly is big news. English sparkling wine, I'm sure you've heard about this, English sparkling wine is really, as we say in England, the bee's knees.
Right,
Yes.
right. We did talk about that and we got so lost in the English wine history. It was kind of like, okay, we're just going to skim over it. But it sounds like you've got a really great understanding of it, which is really awesome. But I want to kind of go back to Mallorca here. I think when it comes to Mallorcan wines, I'm kind of curious what we should know, what we should look for as far as Mallorcan wines. Let's say we find ourselves on the island like Steph will in a couple months. What do we need to know about the wines? And could you let us know what favorite local food and wine experience must be sought out?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to bring the history up to date, again, for political and commercial reasons, most of the winemaking died out until as recently as the 1960s. So at the beginning of the 1960s, there was pretty much no wine being produced in Mallorca. The early 1960s coincided with the holiday boom of package tourists from UK and other places. So we had massive commercial rise in property and holidays, and a couple of enterprising guys who still run a couple of the biggest wineries here today started making wine. Unfortunately, it was mass wine for mass tourism. So the quality in the early days in the 60s wasn't very good. When I first started coming to Mallorca, less than 20 years ago, there's probably about 12 working bodegas on this fairly small island. Today, a few years on, we have no less than 75 commercial working wineries on an island that's 1 hour wide and 1 hour long.
Wow.
That's huge.
That's huge. And what we've got here is both international and also indigenous native grape varieties. So, for example, yes, of course, we grow Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Shiraz Syrah, and a little bit of many other international red varieties. But we have at least 3 commercially planted varieties now that nobody else in the world, even in the rest of the Balearics, the other islands don't have these, 3+ unique indigenous native varieties. And they are called Callet, Callet, which is red, Manto Negro, which is also red, and a white variety called Premsal or Premsal Blanc, also known as Moll, Moll. And you will not find those, as I say, in any other place in the world, even in our other islands here. And when people come to Mallorca, I would hope that they would appreciate both the international varieties we're growing here and growing very well amongst these great family bodegas, and also our unique varieties. And luckily, in recent years, the authorities here have allowed some of the lost varieties from way back to be brought back into plantation. So we have things like Gorgayasa and Escorza and grapes which nobody, even me in my business, had never heard of before. So it's a really great time for Mallorcan wine and unique US, if you like, USP, a great selling point, unique varieties.
Hey, Martin, can you give us an idea of the dominant styles? Are we, because I hear a lot of red. I understand there used to be sweet wines made there, but I think I had a friend who went there and had a sparkling wine as well. But what are the dominant styles? What would you say makes up the propensity of the wines there?
Okay, yeah, we have a little bit of sweet wine, we have a little bit of sparkling wine, and we have a fair amount of white. The white always sells out because it's relatively small in production, because, as you rightly say, we are dominated by reds. And that's basically driven by the climate. Mm-hmm. We are a very, very hot, normally very sunny island. Average year, we have 300 plus days of sunshine. Temperatures from May onwards, will rise, and we could have 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I'm talking Celsius, not Fahrenheit.
That's fine.
90 something Fahrenheit or more for many weeks right up to the harvest time, which is always very early. We start harvesting here at the beginning of August.
Wow.
August.
That's crazy. Now, do you make
hot?
Do you make a fair amount of sparkling wine there or not?
A little bit, not
okay.
A great deal. Again, the problem is the climate. The
right.
heat is so intense that we're getting such ripeness in the grapes. It's very hard to produce things like sparkling wine, which need to be picked very early. And we already pick in August.
Right.
And of course, you haven't got the acidity because the grapes get so ripe. We really can't grow Sauvignon Blanc, for example. We have a little bit, but it doesn't work here because it's so darn hot.
That makes sense.
Makes sense.
We're talking about lots of robust, full-bodied reds. The alcohol could be quite high. I've got a bottle in front of me here. I'm not drinking it, by the way. It's too early. I've got a bottle here from the Pla y Llevant, the Plain and East Coast DO of Mallorca, from a guy called Tony Helibert. And we're looking at an alcohol level of 14% plus. And that's quite normal in our reds.
Now, are there 2 DOs or are there more now?
There are 2 DOs. We have a Mallorca table wine and sort of country wine appellation. But in terms of DOs, the equivalent of the AC in France, we only have 2.
Okay.
Bini Salem, which takes its name from the little village, which is the wine capital of the main region. And then the one I mentioned earlier, the Pla y Llevant, which is very, very tiny.
Okay. And we'll put those in the blog. We'll spell them out, so you guys can see what they're about. And I think we were going to ask you about food. So you've got these rich, full-bodied reds, warm climate, makes a lot of sense. So what do you guys have with the local wines? What's something everybody's got to try when they come to Mallorca?
Okay, well, food here is fantastic. I mean, again, people don't know that we have these wonderful restaurants, fantastic chefs, and great food products. Again, surprisingly, like the number of wineries, this tiny island has no less than 9 Michelin stars on it. Wow. 7 1-star and 1 2-star restaurant, plus a number of other really, really great chefs producing stylish, great presentation food, great quality. But we do have a lot, thank goodness, of traditional restaurants serving typical Mallorcan tapas, which is not dissimilar to the mainland of Spain with its own quirkiness. But things like padron peppers, things like frito Mallorcan, which is an offal-based dish with potatoes and peas and onions, and 1 or 2 other Mallorcan specialists like tumbet, sopa Mallorcan. So most of the restaurants, dare I say, the old-fashioned traditional ones, will have a great range of big, hearty Mallorcan plates and or tapas to go with the robust reds. Also, of course, because we're very much an island surrounded by a sea full of fish, we have fantastic fresh fish here. I bought some cod in the market the other day, and I had 2 big cod fillets, which I cooked for dinner in the apartment, and they cost me less than €5.
Wow!
So So fish is a seriously big dish here. So, of course, that's when we want our lovely fresh whites, while we still can get them in their small quantities. And we also drink a lot of rosé because given our climate, drinking red at lunchtime at that high alcohol level, it can be a bit sleep-inducing, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, I am definitely looking forward to a lot of that seafood. And I do have a question. You mentioned the other islands. Do they have similar, food and wine experience? Is it not just Mallorca, but all of the islands?
Yeah, all 4 islands have really great traditions. And what perhaps is surprising for a group of islands so close together is they're all very different. Mallorca is very, I was going to say Spanish, it's not. It's very Catalan/Spanish. It's Catalan first, Spanish second. Mallorcan language is not dissimilar to the Catalan language, for example. So we're quite Catalan here. Menorca, the second biggest, is relatively much more British because of its history during the war and things like that. It's quite British in flavour, but again has good wine and food culture, but very small in terms of wine production. I think there's only, to my knowledge, 4 or perhaps a couple more working wineries. And then, of course, we have Ibiza and we have Formentera, both of which produce wine in some quantities. Ibiza is, again, quite Spanish, but Formentera, although I haven't been, I'm told is quite Italian in style. So again, the food and the wine in any island or country always traces back to the history and the culture. It is what it is because of its culture centuries ago.
And isn't it true that some of the favorite dishes or a lot of dishes served in these Michelin restaurants have their roots in, I don't want to say peasant food, but the food of the people? I mean, what people ate, what everyday people ate. Is that still a factor in the Balearic Islands as well?
Yeah, certainly in Mallorca. I've eaten in, I think, all of the Michelin-star restaurants here now and hundreds of others as well. All of our chefs, whether they're from overseas or in many cases they are actually local chefs, a lot of lady chefs, by the way, in the great restaurants here, they are cooking with local produce. Many of them will go to the market in Palma, here in Palma, or in their small market town in the morning, and the menu at lunchtime and night is based on what they buy locally from the local producers in that market that morning. So we're talking about food which has been eaten here for centuries, just raised to a Michelin style level in terms of style and presentation. So absolutely, it's local food for local people, very much so.
It doesn't get better than that. So
No.
how do we, Martin, get our hands on some of these wines from Mallorca? If, a lot of our listeners are in the U.S., but we have listeners in Europe and elsewhere. But so, is it widely exported?
Well, the best way to get your hands on Mallorcan wine is to come here and buy it and drink it.
There you go.
Done and done.
I say that because, in all honesty, it's quite difficult. I'm not terribly au fait with the States to a great deal. There is one really, really good importer in Florida, in Miami, who represents 6 or 7 of our small family bodegas. It's very difficult for our bodegas to export because they produce small quantities and the costs are quite prohibitive. We have to import everything apart from the grapes, and we have to ship it out off the island to the mainland and then onward ship. So our costs are quite high. Working in the States is even more difficult because it's relatively easy to get the goods to Germany, Switzerland, who are big lovers of our wines, and the countries like Belgium and Holland, for example, as well. The UK to some degree, but again, that's dominated by the supermarket market, and prices finish up way above what you can get Australian or New Zealand or Chilean wine for the UK market, unfortunately. That's another story. The problem with the US market is you're not one single market. You're 50 different markets according to the state you're working in.
And we're sorry.
Yeah, it's not your fault, but it's a problem because you've got the small bodegas making a few thousand bottles of wine. The paperwork to get their wine into one of the states in the US is so difficult, they don't bother. It's not worth their while doing it, to be honest. But having said that, there are some bodegas with their wines in some parts of the US. And I'm sorry I haven't got information here. I might try and find it out one day, but it is quite hard to find. It is quite difficult. And importantly, it will never be inexpensive. I was going to say, looking at the UK market, I can buy a bottle of local wine here in my local wine merchant for €5 or €6. When that same wine gets shipped over just to the UK, that can finish up at about £15 sterling in the UK market, which is a huge difference.
No, I totally understand that. I miss being able to walk into a grocery store in Europe and just paying €5 or €6 for a good bottle of wine. But what I think our listeners would like to hear a little bit more about is what you do with Wine Educators International and being a wine educator where you live, and all about what you do, where do you go, what do we need to know, all those good things.
Okay, well, I like the introduction where I'm an entertainer rather than a educator and a trainer. Although I do educate and I do train, I like being an entertainer because for me, as I said in my bio, it's all about introducing people to quality food and quality wine. So what we try and do as a business, as wine educators, is to present informally, because it shouldn't be taken too seriously in many respects. It's eating and drinking. That's all it is. We try and present informally. We try and get people to understand their palates by tasting, which is the only way to really do it. We try to get them to understand the difference between quality wine and less than quality wine. We try and get them to understand why prices are what they are for whatever the product is, the reasons behind it. And we try and talk, we don't talk about winemaking a great deal unless we're training, because a winery is a winery is a winery. A bodega is a bodega is a bodega. We try and talk about things like the history I've talked about today, the culture, the geography, the reasons the wines are like they are, and get people to understand where they're coming from. So for me, it's about presenting tastings. It's about making food and wine pairings, whether it's a wine and chocolate event, whether it's working with a great chef anywhere around Europe or other places and making a food and a wine pairing dinner with 6 or 7 courses and 6 or 7 different wines. And also about bringing small groups of people who want to discover the real story behind a destination, whether it's Mallorca or England or Sicily, or I'm slightly off the wall and go to strange places. So in recent years, we've taken groups to places like Serbia and Kosovo and Albania and Slovenia, perhaps lesser known wine countries, to show them the wines, to meet the producers and talk to them personally, to actually meet the chefs in the great restaurants in Mallorca and the other places I mentioned, to go to the local markets, to buy local produce, take it back to the restaurant or hotel or school and cook it and eat it for lunch, and show people just what any destination like Mallorca actually has in terms of food, wine, restaurants, hotels. We're not just about mass tourism.
Did I see you in Norway recently?
I was in Norway. I've been in Norway a couple of times. I don't make wine, but my golly, they've got some great food and some great chefs and some great prices too.
Have you ever had smoked whale carpaccio?
I've had smoked whale, but it was served in a big block, like a piece of blubber, rather than carpaccio.
Okay, all right. Just curious. That's the dish that got away from Steph.
It was interesting. It was quite strong.
Yeah, that was the one thing I came back from Norway and said I had a regret that I didn't try the whale carpaccio, and I felt really disappointed about my efforts there.
You should try it. Definitely go back and try it. It's definitely worth trying once.
Yeah. That's right. Well, and as an educator, I wanted to ask you too, because I saw on your Facebook page that there was a gin and tonic workshop. So, I'm assuming that you do a lot outside of wine too.
Yeah, we do a certain amount outside of wine. Obviously, wine and food is the most important thing, but we recognize that certain other products need their place and need explaining as well. If you take, for example, gin's a good one to mention because the recent revival of the gin market is just incredible. Not many years ago, gin was a dying product. There was one or two famous brands and people didn't drink gin and tonic anymore. Suddenly, around the world, every bar has to have 40, 50 different gins, all produced locally. England's got hundreds of gins. Mallorca's got gins. Minorca's got gins. So we realised that we need to explain again because every gin will have its different component parts, its different ingredients. It may need a different tonic water to go with it. The accompaniments are different from one gin to another. So we thought doing gin and tonic workshops with some bars and some cocktail makers was a really good idea.
Yeah. Are you a gin fan too?
I drink it occasionally. I like it. I don't drink it a lot, but I do like it. I love some of the new ones that are coming out because they've just got so much flavour. And of course, the tonic water market has also changed. It's no longer just one or two big brands. There are small tonic water producers making different flavours. I mean, I flew from London to here to Palma 2 days ago, and even my cheap budget airline had a gin and tonic menu in the seat pocket.
Oh my God. There has been a gin revival of sorts. That was actually one of my coursework assignments for the diploma a couple years ago, and I did like 14-page paper on the gin revival. And a lot of it had to do with the craft movement and with people wanting to drink local, the local food movement. I tried to attribute it to Snoop Dogg's gin and juice, but I was unable to work that into the paper. But yeah, there has been a huge, we have at least 4 or 5 kinds of gin downstairs. I mean, and then like you said, the tonic water, the Fever Tree, the different brands that even have different brands within the brands, you know.
Yeah.
You see Fever Tree,
yes.
3-4 years ago, it didn't exist. You never heard of it. Now the whole world knows Fever Tree.
It's my favorite. I love it. I could just drink it by itself with a little lime. Yeah. But yeah.
Absolutely. Likewise. Yeah.
Hey, Martin, I got a question for you.
Okay.
I will bet with all your travels that you have an embarrassing wine story. And actually, Steph, you were supposed to ask this. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go jump on it.
Yeah, it was just I kind of want to, I kind of can hear your smile back there. And it's like, you do sound like an entertainer or an edutainer, as we like to say here. So we like to, talk about what it is that makes us real. Do you have a funny or embarrassing wine story that you can keep it real with our listeners?
Well, I think the embarrassing story, it's one that, it's not just one story. It's a story that happens several times where I get put down by so-called expert sommeliers in restaurants who don't know what I do and don't know who I am and try and pull the wool over my eyes when it comes to wine. And there's 2 that springs to mind. One was in a little restaurant in England where I was with some family members. I wasn't known in the restaurant particularly. They wouldn't have known who I was. And I knew that my family guests enjoyed a nice glass of the great wine Muscadet de Sévry from the Loire Valley in France. So because it was quite a decent-sized family party, we ordered 2 bottles of this Muscadet, which first of all came to the table open, which of course they should never do. So they got sent back, much to the chagrin of the supposed sommelier. And when they came back and were opened in front of us, as they should be, and poured out, they were cloudy. So I said to the person who served us, I'm sorry, this is not right. I don't even need to smell it or taste it. This wine should not be cloudy. It's not designed to be cloudy. Can you please change it? And I'd seen the restaurant proprietor in the background hovering sort of against the wall, and the young waiter or waitress, I can't remember which, went over to the owner and obviously passed on my comment, and there was a whispered conversation between them. And then the young waitress came back and said, "Excuse me, sir, it's supposed to be like that."
Well, you said Muscadet, right?
Yeah, Muscadet.
So, surly aging. Maybe they didn't rack the wine, you think?
Well, yes, and you should leave some of the lees in the wine, hence your lee. but it shouldn't be cloudy.
Huh.
And of course, the other great challenge is when you want to have a bottle of decent Pinot Noir. And you guys in the States have got some fantastic Pinot Noirs from California, Oregon, Washington State. And I drink Pinot Noir a lot when I'm in the UK because I love it, and I love it on a warm day. And it needs, like Beaujolais wines, often to be served a little bit cool, not cold,
right?
A little bit cool, the acidity, chilled, exactly. And I took a group out to a restaurant again in the UK, and I ordered the wine for the group. And one of the wines I ordered was Pinot Noir, and it came and it was actually quite warm, so I asked for ice buckets for the table. And somebody looked down his nose at me and said, "Excuse me, sir, you do know it's a red wine, don't you?"
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Tim and I had a story like that. It's like, do you know who I am?
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's always embarrassing, and I don't like it when it happens, but it does happen, and yeah, there we go.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you don't want to be confrontational because it's like you have to then press it because you're like, actually, I do know, and I still would like the ice buckets.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's my card.
Yeah, exactly. Well, where can our listeners find more about you online, connect with you, maybe ask you some more questions, anything we left out that they're wanting to know more about? Where can they find you?
Okay. Because so much of our work is bespoke, we tend to stick to the social media for our sort of marketing, as it were. We don't do a lot of promotions because we're, as my bio says, pretty busy anyway. But we are very active on all of the networks. So you will find us on Twitter we are at The Wine Educator, very simple. We are on Facebook as Wine Educators International. We are on Instagram also as Wine Educators International, all one word joined together, lowercase. So it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and for the business people, we're also on LinkedIn, as we call it here, LinkedIn, again as Wine International. So all the networks, we're there. I'm Martin Ward on Facebook, but the company name for our pages and the other accounts.
Very good. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'm really happy to talk to you guys, and I hope I've done a good job in selling Mallorca.
Oh my gosh, I want to be there right now. I swear it's been on my bucket list for quite a while. So I think you gave our listeners a really nice idea of what to expect in terms of weather and food. And, I think you set the scene there, and we really appreciate you making time to talk to us because you are a busy, busy guy.
You're very welcome. You're obviously very welcome here at any time. Just let me know. Your listeners also, they can contact me and I can point them in the right direction for hotels, restaurants. I can organise wine tours from half a day to a week if they want here and other places. So I have a real passion for my job, as I hope it comes across. I have a real passion for where I live here in Mallorca. I'm sitting in almost with my back to the sun now, so it's a beautiful sort of balmy spring evening. So what can I say? Come and visit.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. So one more question. What wine are you opening as soon as you hang up with us?
I'm going to my local bar for a beer.
Awesome. That's great. And that's
classic.
That's perfect. All right. We'll let you get to that beer, Martin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Martin.
Nice to talk to you guys.
Nice talking to you too.
Good day.
Talk
Bye.
to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Well, Val, I loved that interview with Martin because his passion just shined. And even it was so perfect when you said, I can hear you. I can hear the smile from over the Skype. And it was true because he just projected all of that good energy and love for what he does.
He does. And his image on Skype is like these palm trees.
Oh, I know. I was going to say something so that our listeners could hear, like, see what we see on the Skype. Like, yeah, his photo is a beach scene.
Yeah, there are mountains in the background and these palm trees, and you can, it's almost like he brought us there just for a little visit. And I really appreciated that. And I really appreciate his depth of knowledge as far as the historical aspects of the Balearic Islands and the knowledge of the food and the culture, and even learn a little bit about English wine, because we found the history. Sometimes the history can be a little overwhelming because there are different accounts of it. So I really appreciate him just educating us on the different grapes, because I'd read about them, but I didn't know how to say them.
Right?
So,
yeah. I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah, no, I mean, Calette, no, it's Caillet, or, I don't remember what he said now, but
Caillet,
squaring us away on the food and the grapes, and I really, really liked it. So I think, Martin, it was so great to finally get you on the podcast and listen to everything you had to say about Mallorca, and we hope to see you there very, very soon. So should we move on? I'm sorry.
Let's move on. And because he is really our shout out for this week. I mean, even just getting all of our schedules together, it took us 3 years or something.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years. Yeah, two or 3 years. Yeah.
So thank you, Martin. And then also thank you to our supportive patrons, our Reserva Superiore supporter, Robin Sauls from Girls Gone Grape, our Reserva supporter, Auntie in Georgia.
And our tenacious tasters, Jeff E. from the award-winning We Like Drinking podcast, Sebastian of Sassy Italy Tours, Jen in Maryland, David and Lisa in Illinois, Anne Marie in Virginia, and our It's Not 5 o'clock and We Don't Care listeners, Meg in South Dakota, Clay in Arizona, John, Andrew, Aswani in California, Chantel is in Ontario, Canada, Mary Lou in Pennsylvania, Kathy in Georgia, Chris, Janet, and Diane in Colorado. In Illinois, we have Stephen Renee, Kathy's in Tennessee, Ashley's in North Carolina, and Sean is in Ohio.
And our Tastemaker listeners, David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California, Chip and Katie in Pennsylvania, Danielle and Serena in New York.
So you can go to our Patreon page for more details at patreon.com/wine to5podcast, and go to our website, Wine25, if you want to shop with our affiliates for books, arts, travel clubs, gifts, all kinds of goodies, pictures, and all of that fun that we're having on that website.
And we are here for you every week with a new episode every Thursday. And in between those episodes, you can find us at Wine25 on the social spaces. And please go join our Facebook group called the Wine25 Community, where you can connect with one another. And if you want to connect with Val personally, she is on Twitter at WineGalUnboxed, and as Vino with Val on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And I am online as the Wine Heroine. So until next week, cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Wine to 5 podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.